All right, nice to see everyone. A lot of familiar faces, but also new ones today. So today I will not be talking about so much on our safety solution because I think I said enough of it already. So today I'll be doing a soft launch or something exciting that we are building in the Gen AI space. But before I go onto that, I wanted to recap a bit on some of the statistics that we have found in terms of safety, especially in Singapore. So just a quick recap on what we specialize in. For video analytics, we mostly look at safety issues, and this can be anything from workers standing under suspended loads near operating machineries, and a lot of high-risk critical use cases as well, beyond just PPE detection, right? Because some countries in Asia kind of also give out PPE to some extent. But in general, we do try to look at a lot of the high-risk ones as much as possible. And the way we do this is by connecting to existing cameras. They don't have to buy expensive cameras as well, like my dear friend just mentioned, cheap and good. I think that team needs to go across all solutions. We need to provide very valuable solutions at cost-effective rate, and not just that they are good but very expensive. Then it will never commercialize. So if we look at the construction industry, we need to understand from a technology standpoint, this is a very challenging environment. It's outdoors. No one wants to buy expensive cameras. Connection is bad. Weather conditions, lighting conditions, objects very small, dynamic environments, everything shifting and moving all over the place. So from a video analytics technology standpoint, it's actually very, very challenging. You know, I can run a camera here and detect all of you probably with 97, 98% accuracy. But if I bring it out to the field, maybe that can drop to 30% if we don't do some of what the things we are doing here in this slide. For example, converting 2D to 3D with single cameras, or long-range detection in low lighting conditions on low-resolution cameras as well. So MOM VSS mandate came out last year in June, so we work closely with MOM. This is not the end goal, of course. I can't say what's the plans, but in general, so MOM mandated that $5 million projects and above need to have cameras in place, or what they call VSS, video surveillance systems, to look at high-risk activities and industries. So, of course, this was mostly led by a lot of the government agencies and developers and contractors first that already had this in the specs. But now, because this is in, even the private projects or even small projects such as bungalows that are worth more than $5 million in construction would require this as well. So now I will release some of these interesting statistics. So these interesting statistics, before I show you what those are, I'm going to caveat a bit and put a bit of disclaimer. These are not online and anywhere. These are only from our customers. And to give you a context, we have about 250 over projects and more than 5,000 cameras as well. So this is a relatively good representation on what the current state of projects are when it comes to safety. The top three most used use cases are these three, which directly correlates also to globally causes of fatalities. So this is kind of expected, right? Workers under load, working at height, and going too close to operating plants. The second statistic is quite interesting. When there's an upcoming safety audit or reporting, there's a spike in compliance alert. I don't have to tell you why this is the case, but of course, this is important to note because at the end of the day, when you use such tools and systems, and the human in the loop is important, which I agree as well, we need to have some checks and balances on who is using the system as well. Because if the user of the system hides too much information, then the value of the system will not be realized, and then it defeats the whole purpose. The third one is, of course, in construction, we are very aware of this hierarchical dynamic, right? So you have your client, consultant, general contractor, subcontractor, worker. Like for us, we are one of the lowest life forms. But, you know, this hierarchical thing comes with very interesting dynamics. Who is the one that buys our system? Who is the one that uses our system? Have very, very different outcomes. And what we have seen is that if, for example, there's a particular client or consultant that is too strict, and let's say if the alert comes in, after 5 seconds, it's asking where is the follow-up. If we go down this route, the end user, which may be the contractor, will use the system in a way that is very, very counterintuitive, because then no one wants to show anything. They want to hide everything, right? So helping to understand across all the different parties that are involved, how this system is going to be used, and how is the realistic response time, etc., which I'll come to later, is very critical to the success and adoption and realization of such systems. The third thing is what we have noticed as well, because nowadays we do have corporate and enterprise contracts with most of the major contractors. That means that they just use our system across the board for all their projects and not just project by project. But what we have seen is that if the safety HQ personnel does a frequent audit on their own projects, and some of the statistics that I mentioned earlier, they generally have a much better success rate and outcome of using the system versus a company that does it project by project basis and only lets their project decide how they want to use it. Because at the end of the day, the make and break of the system is by the ultimate end user of the system. The next one is the data from all the things that we correlate and connect can actually give you a reasonable insight on how the safety overview is or safety perception is at the site. So this is a real case. I won't name which contractor this is, but this contractor has 8 projects with us. And every quarter, we will do this exercise where we look at the makeup of the number of non-compliance alerts, which type of alerts, the response time, and the resolution time. So out of all the 8 sites, 7 of the sites responded within, I would say, 6-8 hours. There was one site that responded in 3 days, every 3 days. And that site, in the next one, had a fatality. Now, I'm not saying there's some correlation here, but it can be an indication on how safety is perceived to some extent at the site as well. This one is also a very interesting statistic. So we surveyed and we asked a lot of our customers, because there are many ways to use this data and to communicate what we are finding from the system. In Asia, the stick approach is a bit more prominent. Outside of Asia, no stick, carrot first. So a lot of the times, companies try to incentivize the workers and the subcontractors through extra meals, breaks, trips, etc. And that works really well in terms of changing the behavior. But some, they straight away send an email from our system to issue a fine, which also works for them, but they can do what they want. So these are some of the interesting benchmarks that we have looked at our very successful projects, and we noticed that if they are within these 3 parameters, it could mean that their safety, their treatment of safety or their attitude towards safety to some extent is relatively good. And the best practices for adopting such a system, we always recommend you start with a small group, small area first. After that, you try to involve all the parties, like I mentioned, consultant, developer if you need to, and then you try to go with the carrot approach as much as possible. It may take a longer route, but we still recommend doing that, and then you should have success in reducing your non-compliances. Okay, so going beyond safety, we are releasing newer modules for productivity and security. These are critical to projects, maybe not necessarily in Singapore. For example, in Australia, we are helping a contractor save thousands of dollars a week in terms of lost materials in a remote site because the neighboring site is stealing their materials. So the funny thing is that they are both stealing each other materials. So, different country, different problems. Productivity as well. I think in Asia, a lot of overclaim, right? Contractors say, I turn on my engine for 12 hours, but I only take 2 hours. These kind of things, we are also trying to help uncover it to reduce waste as much as possible in this industry. To give you an insight on what we are actually tracking, we're actually tracking things like the total movement time of machineries. So they cannot use the engine as an identifier to say how long I turn on the engine. And we're looking at man hours spent at different areas as well to see if the amount of headcount promised by the subcon and the actual hours they spend is correct. So on top of that, we are releasing new Gen AI functions that will change the way in some of how this video analytics will work when it comes to not only contextual understanding, but eventually embodying it into robotics as well. So I'm short of time. I'm going to just quickly go through the 4 key points that I wanted to mention. There are essentially 4 things that we are focusing on. Number 1, we are applying this to second layer AI checks to increase the accuracy from our traditional AI. We are also going to have deeper insights to understand the trends, like what I mentioned earlier, in terms of the customer that we were reviewing the 8 projects on, to be more automatic instead of us having to do that work manually, looking at the data. We're also going to allow customers to combine use cases or make very, very specific use cases. For example, if the person is wearing a red color vest and has the word banksman on it, exclude him from certain checks if needed, right? And we're also going to be checking things, for example, the trucks going out of the site, the spoil, how much they're carrying, what materials they're carrying, and the capacity, and using that LVM to detect all kinds of different kinds of contextual scenarios. So with that, comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you.